Ghosts, spirits, and the paranormal, all these supposed entities seem to have had an effect on an alarming amount of us, and many guests of a particularly interesting hotel in Northumbria, with a rumoured grisly history, have consistently reported incidents that simply can't be explained. But does this mean that this hotel is actually haunted?
I heard this weird noise, and what's that? It's in this room. So I get up to put the lamp on, and there's this woman sitting in bed, and her eyes are out on stalks, and she's going blue at the lips. She's literally being throttled.
People experience things. Yes, they do experience things. Are they paranormal? Well, no, they are a result of just normal human psychology.
One night he woke up to a woman in a white dress sitting on the end of his bed, all in white, and he physically and visibly saw this woman.
Went into the cellar, and boy oh boy did he have an experience. Somebody grabbed hold of him.
All my experiences of dealing with matters like this, there's always an underlying issue that's not paranormal at all, but often more psychological.
I investigate whether or not psychology outweighs personal testimony, as I hope to find out one way or another if...
This place is definitely haunted. Absolutely no doubt about that at all.
First moved in, we weren't really happy with how the sofas were arranged, so we moved them all around just a lot. Basically left no floor space, we saw every bit of the floor. And that was about 2 months later. Then we found this picture underneath the sofa of it was like black and white, of like a couple in a photo booth, like one of those draw on pencil ones, and that just appeared in our flat and we had no idea where it came from. And obviously, because we moved the sofas around so much, we thought, well, we would have seen it at some point, so it was very weird that it just suddenly turned up.
You don't have any kind of explanation for that at all?
No, not at all.
So do you ever get uneasy when you're in the house on your own? And have you ever experienced anything when you've been on your own?
I'd say I feel uneasy on my own if I know that the guys aren't in here. So I can expand on it more. One time I was in my room on my own, but all the guys were in here, and I went out and into the kitchen, went back into my room, and the wardrobe door was wide open. I've got like a walk-in wardrobe, and I was like, oh, that's odd. I just thought, oh, I've just left it open or closed it. So I made a conscious effort to close it, and then came back in the kitchen later on again to get a drink of water, and then went back in, and the wardrobe was wide open again. I came in and explained that to the guys, and they said that's what happened with the guy who lived in the room previously, because I've only lived in this house for a year and they've lived in it for 2. That night I had to ring my friend Zoe, and she came and stayed with me, and that's despite the guys being in here. And for a few nights, you probably remember, even though there were people in their rooms, I felt so uneasy sleeping in there. So I asked Aidan if he would stay in here and watch the telly, so that I had the telly noise like in the background, to just as a comforting thing, because I didn't feel like I could sleep. Hence why I rang my friend to come and stay with me that night, where I found out about the wardrobe. And even then we both couldn't sleep. We were both just lying there sort of listening out, and that night actually there was knocking on my door, on my bedroom door, but Zoe didn't hear it, and it was sort of like really slow, and then it got quicker and quicker and quicker, and I was just watching the door, and I was so scared to go and open it because I didn't know what was on the other side, and then eventually it just slowed back down and stopped.
Can you definitely say that was none of you guys?
Yeah, well,
Are these reports definitely the result of paranormal goings-on? It's hard to say without actually witnessing what Becky's talking about, but something that really does impress me is the consistency of her experience and that of the previous tenant.
Sort of all the source of everything that's been happening is from, and the guy who lived in this room before me, who lived with the guys I'm living with now, actually said that he had the same thing where he'd walk in and this would just be wide open, and as you can see that it's not, it doesn't just come open on its own, and it was physically like this when we'd both come into the room on a couple of occasions, And then also we both had the same thing of in the night waking up to the wardrobe rattling like that. It was sort of like that, but it was making a noise, sort of like knocking. And so that was exactly how his experience of this room as well. So the fact that we've both had the same account of the version of events and relayed that to the guys who live here kind of says to me that it's not in our imagination and it's not sort of us making up in our heads, it's something that's present. Ricky, the guy who lived in here before me in this room, told the guys that one night he woke up to a woman in a white dress sitting on the end of his bed, all in white, and he physically and visibly saw this woman. So the guys sort of have a theory that that's this spirit that's sort of like playing with us all, is this woman, and that she lives in the wardrobe. And I have no idea of the history of this house, but yeah, so he saw a woman. I've yet to see a woman. I've had some of the experiences he's had, but I've not seen a woman as of yet. Hopefully not, fingers crossed.
So, do you think the house is haunted then?
I wouldn't say that. I just think it's a very creepy old house. I don't really believe in ghosts, and I haven't really seen anything that would make me change my mind here. I think you might be different.
I don't know if it's haunted. I don't think there's something there that's wanting to scare us, but I think there's a presence here. There's a presence of something else.
What do you mean by that?
I don't think haunted sounds like there's something trying to torment us and torment with our like feelings or whatever and make us feel uneasy. I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's any danger here. But I feel like there is a trapped spirit or something that's present within the house.
The reports are certainly interesting, but although a couple of people claim to have heard or actually seen something, others in the house aren't quite as sure or impressed, so it's not particularly credible. What's interesting about this hotel is that guests seem to have similar accounts of what they've experienced. But before I start my investigation of this supposedly haunted building, I wanted to get the thoughts of a priest, hopefully one that had perhaps witnessed anything of this nature, or been called to exorcisms. Religion and the paranormal often seem to be linked, in part due, of course, to popular horror films. Has this led to distortion on what the church actually makes of all of this?
As being a priest, you often get people asking you to come and perform exorcisms. People are often kind of spooked out, they've got an anxiety, maybe someone's died in the house, maybe a relative's just died, and they've watched too much TV or ridiculous films. When I was trained to be a priest, I was in a parish in Durham, and the priest I was with was firmly convinced in paranormal experience, hauntings and that. And there was at one point when they were inundated with requests to go and perform exorcisms, and I had to gently point out to him it was also the week that they just released the film Exorcist on DVD, and people were watching this film and freaking themselves out and convincing themselves that noises they heard or whatever were ghosts and that, and were genuinely frightened and generally wanted a priest to come and perform an exorcism. But in all my experiences of dealing with matters like this, there's always an underlying issue that's not paranormal at all, but often more psychological. To give a genuine example of a story, was a woman who thought there was a possession in her house and there was something going on, and I was invited to go. I took someone with me. If you go into that sort of situation, you never go alone. If it's a woman, particularly as a male priest, so I went with a female friend. And what had happened is she had moved into a new flat and been broken into. Almost in the first week, someone had kicked the door down, and she was feeling just incredibly vulnerable, absolutely vulnerable. And it was the experience of being broken into and all that. It wasn't that there was a ghost around, or it was just her anxiety and fear. And what I do in a situation like that is say, well, we can say a prayer, a blessing. So let's invite sort of joy and love into this place, and just help try and relax someone from their levels of anxiety. I've never encountered a real case of haunting because it's not real. It's simply a psychological conditioning. If you're a priest, well, basically you do believe in an afterlife, but not one that's in any material sense connected to this this realm. It doesn't make any sense. You know, you either believe in an afterlife or not. Ghosts and things like that don't make any sense in terms of most faith traditions. So from a religious point of view, but also I'm a sociologist, so I'm interested in sociology and psychology. You know, the sort of paranormal doesn't make much sense, but it's very believable.
Hollywood films play their part in this, obviously, but the most avid paranormal believer among us would probably point to Bible extracts that seem to mention headless horsemen of the apocalypse and the exorcism of evil spirits, even in the New Testament and the accounts of the apostles.
But those stories are very misunderstood, extremely so. The classic story is the story of Jesus going to an area and coming across a guy who is possessed by a demon called Legion. And the demon is sent into 2,000 pigs, which are then driven into the sea. Now, in our sort of mindset, if you come to people who kind of want to believe in demonic possession and evil spirits, then they think, oh, there you go, there's a story from the Bible that proves it, you know, this happens. But the people hearing that story knew that wasn't about demonic possession. The clue is in the name. The demon's called Legion. Legion represents the imperial Rome that's invaded their area. You know, Palestine's occupied country, and you know, and so the story is actually about, you know, what happens when a country, when people are occupied, and how bound they are. The guy's bound in the graveyard. Yeah, the fact that it's 2,000 pigs is interesting. A, because it's pigs. And we're not the only generation that calls police officers or soldiers of occupying armies or our own police pigs. It was a term that was used then, so it's referring to the occupiers. The fact that it was 2,000 is the same number of Roman soldiers that were garrisoned in the area, which is called Decapolis, the area of the 10 cities.
Religion aside, I still don't think that cases of specific encounters where the person is able to pinpoint and give an accurate report of what's happened to them should be disregarded as nothing. To get a sense of what we're really dealing with here, I had to find a location where this kind of phenomena happens regularly. I wanted to witness this firsthand. So I'm here at the Schooner Hotel in Alnmouth. Apparently the most haunted hotel in the country, with over 60 individual ghosts haunting this place. The way I see it, if I don't find anything here, then I never will. The village of Alnmouth is situated on the northeast coast, about 20 or 30 minutes from Newcastle. While venturing around this little fishing village, I was struck by how picturesque and tranquil a place it seemed, with rolling sand dunes and a sparkling bay that, when the sun hit it, looked like something out of a postcard. It really was a beautiful place, and while I was wandering around taking in the sea air, I almost forgot that I'd be staying in a haunted hotel later that night. The Schooner Hotel itself was once a 16th century coaching inn, and was apparently a stopping point for various traders and smugglers, as the port of Alnmouth was a popular destination for merchants looking to sell their wares. On arrival to the schooner, I was directed onto the top floor, as my accommodation for the night would be room 28, which I had been told was a regular favourite for visitors looking for a scare, as it is generally regarded as the hotel's most haunted room. The documented history of the hotel is sketchy at best, although there are records of a family murder which apparently took place in this very room. Paranormal activity seems to get reported in locations with an interesting history attached to them. While the Schooner Hotel certainly fits this description, with its own and pretty shocking tale. So I've arrived in room 28, and you walk into the room and there's nothing, nothing immediately strikes me. There's no sort of eerie presence or coldness or anything like that. All I would say so far is that there's a lot of creaks and there's a lot of knocks, but there are people staying down the corridor as well. So, and it's an old building. Old buildings creak. I think we'll wait till nightfall. We might get something more then, but so far, nothing to report. With over 3,000 separate alleged reports in the last few years, it's hard to completely ignore the schooner's reputation of being the most haunted hotel in the country. There is no doubt that they play on this, however. It's one hell of a money spinner. Are people just gullible then? Is there a more rational explanation?
Specifically ghosts you were talking about, there is probably not one explanation which explains all haunting experiences. I don't think people are making them up, although sometimes they probably are. they generally feel like they experience things, but this isn't people coming back from the dead. And when you talk about visual experiences, actually they're relatively rare. Most haunting experiences don't involve seeing anything. They involve hearing things, they involve sometimes smelling things. Sometimes people will report a haunting experience when all they've had is just a cold draft or something like that. So the haunting experience actually isn't often visual, but they all have something in common. The one thing they have in common is you have what's called ambiguous stimuli. So most of the time we see things or hear things and we know what causes it. So you hear somebody talking and you know what's causing that, the person is causing that. But if you were in an environment where there is lots of kind of what we say noise, but I mean noise in a very general sense. So visual noise would be like low lighting, so it's difficult to pick out what things are. Auditory noise is auditory noise, so just non-specific stimuli. Whenever you get that environment, an environment with ambiguous stimuli, the brain is good at interpreting things. It will actually look for an interpretation without consciously realising it. People don't realise it. So you're sat in an environment that's dark, it's late at night, you're in a room on your own, and all of a sudden you hear noises and you have no way of attributing it to anything. Then you start to look for explanations. So we try to explain ambiguous stimuli. That's the starting point of any haunting experience, is an ambiguous stimuli that we have to explain. The human mind also has a predisposition to what's called agency, to blame things on agents. And what I mean by agents is not to be like a stick breaking, but to be a person, something with psychology. So something that has intentions, desires, intentions to do things, if you like. And again, this is a really useful skill. A useful thing to happen. If you're walking through, if you imagine humans when they first evolved, walking through across the savannah, walking across plains, there were lots of things which were dangerous. There were predators, there were other humans who would kill people, and you have to be aware of them. So if you heard something ambiguous, it could be nothing, or it could be something that's out to kill you. Well, it makes sense to err on the side of caution, to assume it's something that might want to do bad things to you, or might want to, or is the product of an agent, if you like. And so we still have that vestige. So you're in an environment, there's an ambiguous stimuli, you look for an explanation. The first thing that humans look for is agency. And there's been lots of experiments which have investigated that. And you see this very commonly. This is why people, they pick faces see faces in the clouds. So they see ambiguous stimuli, a cloud, and naturally we try to make sense of it in terms of a pattern. So you see a face. If you hear the white noise phenomenon, so if you play white noise on a tape, so electronic voice phenomenon, which people have used to investigate paranormal phenomena, people will pick out voices eventually, but there's no voice there.
So ambiguous stimuli, tricks of the mind, distorted reports affected by what we already know or have been told about a place. But the same problem still crops up for me. Visual distortion is one thing, but a physical experience where a person has actually felt something, been pushed or grabbed, or even strangled. Now that's a different kettle of fish altogether. Sounds ridiculous, right?
Gail, if you wouldn't mind just talking briefly about your own experiences, because I'm sure, being here, working here for 8 years, you've got a few tales to tell about.
This place is definitely haunted.
Right.
Absolutely no doubt about that at all. The first night I came here, there was a family with a young lad, about 15 I think it was, and we were doing an investigation, like an EVP and that in the cellar, and I have to be honest, I wasn't too keen on having the kid round, because people under 18 I don't normally allow, but as it was at my and they were guests here, I could hardly refuse, went into the cellar, and boy oh boy did he have an experience. Somebody grabbed hold of him. He literally took me out on the staircase.
Right.
Legged it out, so he was screaming, let me out, let me out, let me out. After he trampled all over me, he got out, and I went up after him, because it was quite clear that he was quite shaken, absolutely ashen. And and he was very, very shaken up, and it took me quite some considerable time to calm him down, because he kept on saying, it grabbed hold of me, you know.
Really?
I was keen to find out more about my room, the infamous Room 28.
This corridor connects 3 rooms along this building, and it's said that all rooms have some sign of paranormal activity or some ghostly presence. And people staying in the rooms say they can often hear noises along this corridor.
Apparently, so the tale is told, this entire floor was given to the Diversi family, who came over here from France to lay claim to the hotel or the land. You know, I'm not quite sure, because obviously this belongs to the Duke of Northumberland. And apparently they were murdered in their bed. Now, some say it was the husband, who is Papa or Max. I mean, they say it's Papa because, like, I think it would be a child's terminology for father. But I think, you know, from what I can understand, Max was supposed to be his proper name. One of the first landlords, William Brown, he's a bit of a nasty piece of work. He still walks this hotel, and he's probably the one that causes us the most grief, actually. He don't like it, and he don't like anybody who is sort of stepping on his toes. And I've actually got recordings of him.
You've got recordings? Well, when you say recordings, what do you mean by that? Do you mean actual recognised words?
Yeah.
A voice?
A voice. We thought initially, because we knew that we were having lots of activity, and we were asking, can you tap once, can you tap twice, and when we're getting responses. And so, I don't know why, call it sixth instinct or something, and I said to him, come on, Papa, I says, we all know that you run this joint, yeah? And it was just a random question, because generally speaking I do have a set of questions that I ask in every room, so that there can be no disparity. And I got a response saying, you think so?
You think so?
Yeah. And I was like, when I was listening back to the recordings, I was like, hello? Because I'd asked 3 specific questions, and I've got actually, and I said something else to him as well, and I've got not yet. So, and it's quite clear.
It's audible.
It's audible.
I'm not going to lie, Gail was starting to scare me. And she wasn't finished there either.
There's a corridor here. And the staff used to, at times, use that. It used to be the manager's office and stuff. And I came over here and brought them up here as a team. And we had quite a few bits of personal experiences and stuff happen. And everybody retired for the night. And was just starting to doze off. And I said to one of the lasses that was there, I said, should we, cause she got a pendulum. I said, should we do an EVP and a pendulum, bit of pendulum work, see whether if we ask direct questions it will do X, Y, Z. We started having stuff happen, and all of a sudden we heard this hell of a scream. And I just run out the door because I knew it was one of the guests, and I said, what's the matter? And she said, I can't sleep in that room, which was room 30. Her and her husband were in there. She said, I'm sorry, I'm keeping in here. There's no way somebody's just grabbed hold of my legs in the bathroom. Now, I've heard of the taps going on randomly in the bathroom in the middle of the night. So much so that it actually flooded the hotel, because they like taps. And I said, well, there's a spare bed there, like, you know, just settle yourself down sort of thing, calm yourself down. I said, sometimes it happens, you know, and it does freak people out. We just started to doze all off, and all of a sudden I heard this weird noise, and I thought, what's that? It's in this room. So I get up to put the lamp on, and there's this woman sitting in bed, and her eyes are out on stalks, and she's going blue at the lips. She's literally being throttled, and like, that was probably one of my scariest experiences.
This lady who had come from room 30.
30, yeah.
So she'd come into the room and she was saying something was
Well, she couldn't speak because, like, you know, she was just being choked. And but after a bit of a struggle, and I said, William, leave her alone. Yeah, I'm not going to have this. And we got a medium with us as well, so like they did some work as well, and it stopped. But then, like an hour later, he come back again and he started again, didn't he? So we never got any breakfast. We never got much sleep either. But like, it was quite a scary experience, and they have point blankly refused to come back to this place. And that lady, unfortunately, I mean, it really did seriously affect her, and she ended up having a bit of a breakdown over it. And this is one of the things when people come along to these paranormal ghost hunts, we can't guarantee that, you know, they're going to show. They're not going to show. Can't say that you're going to see anything.
But when they do like that, I bet you remember it.
You're telling me. I mean, I've got to be honest, I thought I was going to be calling the police in the paramedic, and that was quite scary, and that did really seriously worry me.
These are the accounts that, to be honest, I just can't ignore. And as night approached, the prospect of spending the night here got even more daunting.
I mean, what Gail just said there, it really is really compelling. I mean, you know, I kind of go back to what Dr. Matthew Watson was saying, the psychologist. He was saying, you know, how people kind of misinterpret what they see, they misinterpret what they feel. It's all kind of ambiguous. Whereas she's talking about a lady actually being throttled, and she said she turned blue from being, you know, physically, there was nothing she could do about it. She was actually being throttled in this very room. It's when you're told that, you know, it really does it really does freak you out.
Night fell over Almouth, and the already sleepy village became almost silent. I suddenly became very aware about what I'd learnt on this journey, and I started thinking about my heightened expectation of finding something.
So expectation definitely plays a role. So if people believe somewhere is haunted, not only are their senses more attuned to listen out for things, but actually they're much more likely to interpret things in that way.
It doesn't take much, you know, to scare the bejesus out of people, you know, and it happens all the time.
I think the problem is people come here and they almost expect stuff, but when they guest here, they don't expect it to happen so much, and when it does, then it does, you know what I mean?
Right, so morning, and nothing really to report, unfortunately, from last night. And I can definitely say I didn't sleep, or I can't have slept more than an hour until it got light. And we had the camera on record from about 1 o'clock till probably around 2:30. A few creaks, a few knocks, but as I said yesterday, old building, you're going to get that. I did hear a sort of rap on the sort of on the wall at one point, but you know, that it could have been anything. It could have just been, I don't know, creaks in the building. Overall pretty disappointed, to be honest. No sign of William and no sign of Papa, unfortunately. Pretty gutted.
I left for Schooner Hotel having found nothing, and although I was certainly disappointed, I did wonder what sort of state I'd be in if I'd have actually had an encounter. And just because I'd been unlucky, that still doesn't prove that the Schooner Hotel doesn't hold unexplained secrets and mysteries to uncover. There is no doubt that the hotel plays on their haunted reputation to pull in the punters. And if there really were 60 ghosts haunting this place, then I would have found something. I stayed the night in Britain's most haunted hotel and came out of it unscathed, but unsuccessful. Can any of you lot succeed where I failed? Goodbye.